Why is having a growth mindset so fundamental to your career?
The only way to build sustainable culture and business is by valuing the growth mindset approach.
You're a chief executive officer of a consulting company.
Success now means getting others to figure it out and start to perform better. There are certainly three principles that I've had. It's something I almost keep a bit canned because I feel like they are very high value.
Hey, welcome to this week's episode of Power Talks. My name is Griffin, the host of the Citizen Developer channel, and today I am joined by special guest Greg Gant. Now, Greg is the CEO of PS Hummingbird, which is a consulting company and Microsoft partner that drives organizational transformation through generative AI, D365, the Power Platform, and more. Greg has almost 20 years of consulting experience in the space and has been able to propel his career to new heights with his new current role. Now, before this, he was a VP of Advisory Services, which is the apex of transforming client engagements from just IT projects to value delivery projects. From consultant to architect to director to VP to CEO, Greg has become remarkable at navigating customer relationships, upskilling his soft skills, and being a positive influence on company culture. Greg, welcome to the show.
Griff, thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. I do have to say, anyone that's worked with me will understand this. I am on the run as usual, so I appreciate kind of throwing it back to a podcast style for me as I'm taking this call out of Starbucks, and it will shortly be on my way to London and then Copenhagen, off to India, down to Dubai, then Australia, then back home finally. So I'm on the move. That's the kind of leader I am. I'm sure we'll maybe double click on a few of those things, but I'm really happy to be here and love giving back to the space, the channel, the community, and your listeners. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, I don't. That's awesome. I don't necessarily call my show a podcast. It's funny because that sounds too official, like a podcast. I need to have a microphone and in a soundproof room, whatever. But this is definitely throwing it back to the podcast era, and I guess the viewers on YouTube will just get a lot of my face on this episode, which hopefully is okay. But no, that's all good. I would love to start the conversation kind of with the beginning of your intro. I mean, you're a chief executive officer of a consulting company. I mean, you're the first CEO on the show. I mean, at the time of recording, you are about 5 months or so into this new role as CEO, and I kind of just wanted to ask you how has this transition been for you moving into this new role?
Yeah, good place to start. It's been a journey for sure, and the journey started way before becoming CEO. I mean, when I think about that title, which is lofty, all that it really means is the buck kind of stops here, right? And that's an important thing. When we think about the transition, it's been exciting. There's been challenges. I'm happy to double click on some of those. I think there might be some good lessons learned for your listeners there. The part that I would say is quite different is like when I was leading advisory services or when I've led delivery teams, delivery practices, you're very focused on a thing or building something. I mean, advisory is a great example. We had a very clear mission. We had a great set of leaders, and we marched towards that mission. And in my role now, that piece is very similar. Like I have a mission, we have very clear goals, we're trying to drive towards those goals, but a broader and a very holistic view of the business is completely required, not optional. I can't say, hey, finance, go do some things and let me know how it goes, or hey, delivery teams, as we build our CE practice out, hey, go get some projects and let me know how those go. I've got to have a clear view of how that looks, but I also have to be involved enough that I understand how it fits into our overarching vision. And then probably, as you always have to do in leadership, is to help influence and vision cast out to make sure that my leaders are all moving in the right direction and their teams are moving in the right direction. And that one level up, maybe, or two levels up from a VP into a CEO, that is challenging. And it's something that you either love doing it or you can get very frustrated. And but when it works, man, it's like watching, there's the famous sort of metaphor of the flywheel starts turning, and everybody says that crap, and it's real. The flywheel starts to turn, and the joy is watching that flywheel turn and start to move. But the challenge is it always needs to move faster, more efficiently. It never stays the same speed, and you've got to just consistently be driving vision, driving execution in the CEO role. That is your job, and there's some challenges in there. I'm happy to maybe double click on a few of those things, but overall, taking it back to your question, the transition has been fun. I'm learning every day. To your intro, this is a new role for me. It's different, and I can lean on a lot of the things I've learned probably from every single role I've ever had in my consulting journey. I take a little bit from everything, but it's putting it all together and kind of driving that single buck stops here job, which is fun, challenging, and it's been a good 5 months.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's exactly what kind of my next question was going to be is I mean, what are some unexpected challenges, maybe one or two that you know, that you didn't
Sure.
really foresee, stepping into this new role that it's like, "Whoa, like this is different or more challenging or something I didn't expect as a part of this
Yeah.
role."
Yeah. And maybe I'll hit a theme on two challenges, and then I'll give you two. A theme that spans all of them is the further you get up the leadership sort of train, and this is just a self evident truth in the term leadership, the less you're doing and the more you're guiding and casting a vision and getting others to buy in and follow and execute your vision, each step up the ladder, that becomes more important. And each step up the ladder, it gets harder and harder. And not because of the usual things. I mean, I'll talk about those. That's one of my challenges. But it's because to get higher up the ladder, you typically have to be really good at what you do. You've got to be one of the best performers, regardless of what that performance is, whether it's being a great consultant, a good project manager, a great architect, a good director of teams, a good vice president of the organization. Each rung you get to, you get really good and you start to figure it out. And just as you start to figure it out, you realize success now means getting others to figure it out and start to perform better. And now in my role, there's nothing more important. The more I do as an individual contributor, sounds kind of crazy, but the more harm I actually do to the organizational health, aka culture, right? So and that's hard for me, Griff, because I love talking to customers. I want to go sell visions and projects and then go help execute and be on the ground of delivery to make sure that it's going the way that I want. And I still do some of those things. I'll talk about that a little bit, but getting others to do that at the top of their game, which ultimately means executing at a level they may not even have realized they could execute at. That's
Yeah.
sort of euphoria, man. You're watching that, it's like that's where the flywheel's really moving. So, what does that mean? Challenges. Coming back to that, I could wax poetic on some of those things. Coming back to the challenges, I think the one piece that's, I think, in my role, always a challenge, and really in any leadership role, it's establishing alignment and vision amongst the org on a single or really maybe two goals and what we're trying to accomplish. And this is true in consulting, which is really the only industry I can speak about. But consulting means there's always competing priorities. There's when we're selling time and value, your organization is built upon time is the most important resource, and there's always competing priorities. There's always a million things to do, but the ability to only do 10 a day. And helping your organization understand what are the 10 most important things we have to get done to be successful in 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, by the end of the year, by the end of next year, 3 year vision. Man, Griff, that's hard to do because number one, you have to start with what is success. And in my business, we call that clarity of purpose. What are we trying to do? And let's make sure first that we're all completely aligned to that. That sounds really easy. It's not. And it's fun because I've done exercises where we run an executive offsite and we say, okay, we all agree this is what good looks like and this is what we're trying to do. And the vision's clear, right, gang? And everybody says, yeah, absolutely, Greg, it makes total sense. And then I'll have someone, an undercover person on my leadership team, have a one-on-one with another leader and say, hey, what's your view of success? And believe it or not, it's actually different than we all just said it was, together in the leadership offsite. So that's always a challenge. You got to work to that. You got to continuously remind and identify and define and illustrate what the clarity of purpose is. And from there, like that's kind of the easy part, but it's super difficult. From there, we have to say, do we understand alignment to cascading execution below us to go get that done, right? And so that means prioritization. And that is where the real 80% of the challenge comes in, because every leader below me, every leader that's working alongside of me, they all have teams. All of their teams might have teams. You know, we're a global organization. I've got a team in Australia, London, the US, India. All of those teams have competing priorities. How in the world, think about this, Griff, how in the world do you make sure that what my team in Australia is working on is driving back a clarity of purpose and execution that all sets us up to win globally, right? That's tough. That means you've got to be super clear on what good looks like, how are we going to go do it, and cascading that downwards. That's been a challenge, and it was a challenge when I was a vice president. It's a challenge at every leadership role, but the sort of the higher you get, the broader that challenge gets, which ultimately just means it gets more and more difficult, right? So that's kind of challenge number one. I think the other one that's been fun and a challenge is, I would just categorize to like expectation management, right? I, in my old role, I would always typically have someone above me that I'm reporting progress and how we're doing and what, challenges and where we need to change our strategy to go win, things like that. Man, I've got like 7 directions in my new role that I've got to focus on. I've got to communicate to my board. I've got to make sure my leadership team is aligned and bought in. I've got to make sure that Microsoft is aligned and bought in. We have a parent company. I have to make sure that they're aligned and bought in. Our customers have to understand our vision and where we're going. So I've got to have sort of this diverse set of expectation setting that I've got to do amongst probably 50 stakeholders and accountability, or accountable folks. Whereas in previous roles, that was maybe a little more lean. That means one big thing that I would set as maybe a takeaway for your listeners, that speed of decision making as a CEO, or as you move up that leadership rung in the ladder, is just extremely critical. Getting your data as quickly as possible, making a decision that's going to put the organization in a position to win, is probably the most important skill that I have to have as a CEO. And if you think about that, just sort of bringing it all back together, how do you make good decisions for the organization? Well, you've got to be really clear on what good looks like, which means you've got to be really clear on how you're going to go achieve that. That ties back into the first challenge, right? So you see, it's all this sort of conundrum style thing that you've got to have figured out. And if you aren't clear on your clarity of purpose and how you're going to get there, ooh, man, it's tough. So that, 5 months in, I think we're there. I think we're making good progress, but that's been a big chunk of work to get done since joining.
Yeah. So I feel like there could be 1,000 questions in everything you just said, but I guess kind of one final thing, and you gave a lot of advice there. I mean, is there, what sort of advice would you have for someone that is maybe in the position you were in 2 years ago, right? Like, you didn't just wake up 5 months ago and decide I want to be a CEO, right? You obviously have been developing your career in a way, and not necessarily that you always, maybe you did, but you didn't necessarily always know what you wanted to do. But say somebody is in a scenario, they're a director, they're a VP, they're in a situation that you, like I said, you're in 2 years ago. What advice would you have to that person when they hear about and are striving for developing their career in a way of becoming a CEO as well. If you are thinking to yourself that you want to get into low-code development or learn about the Power Platform, then I want to personally invite you to sign up for this completely free self-paced course that is going to cover everything you need to know to begin low-code development today. Not too long ago, I was a complete beginner and I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't even know what the Power Platform was. But in just 2 years, I have gone from being an associate to a senior level consultant, and I can truly say that I love what I do. The content in this course is handpicked by me so you can understand the basics of the Power Platform and ultimately be prepared to take the PL 900 certification if that's something you're interested in. If you are interested, be sure to follow the first link in the description down below, and do not forget to use the promo code YouTube at checkout in order to get the course for completely free. This is going to give you immediate access to the entire course so that you can start to change your future today. Now, let's get back to the conversation.
It's a great question, and you kind of hit it there. I don't know if there was ever a point in my career that I've said, like, succinctly, I want to be a CEO of a company. I mean,
Sure.
I've had thoughts of building a company. I wanted to be a leader. I wanted to build teams. I like building culture. And then you sort of keep doing that and keep doing that and keep doing that. And at some point, you start getting decent enough at it that somebody says, hey, would you like to do that at a grand scale?
Yeah.
But there are some principles, to your point, that I would say they aren't the only way, but they are certainly three principles that I've had that have helped me drive my journey, my story to get to where I am. And I've had people ask me this, so it's something I almost keep a bit canned because I feel like they are very high value. And I can tell you this, all three of them are answers that people have given me when I've asked this question to my mentors. And I couldn't even name them all, but they know who they are if they're listening. And I'd start where, to me, it's the most important thing. You have to stay close to the customer. And I don't mean you've got to be billing hours at every level. I don't mean you need to help sell deals. That's important. Both of those are very important. But you need to understand and stay close to, why does a customer buy from us? Why do they like us? Why do they want to deliver? What are their challenges? Direct engagement with our customers. And sometimes those customers can be your partners over at Microsoft. They could be your partners over at actual partners of your company. They could be and most often are your actual customers that you're selling your value to and delivering your value to. Stay close with them, talk to them, understand why they buy from us, understand their challenges, their needs, and that can be in industry or just generic. I mean, stay close to the customer. I'll tell you, even as the CEO down to my leadership team, I have a mandate out to my leaders that say, I don't care what role you are. You could be director of finance, you could be our CFO, you could be director of marketing. You need to talk to a customer once a month, and ideally in person. Go visit them, go see where they work, understand what their office looks like and what their culture is, because this industry and consulting changes so quickly that if you lose sight of what is important to the customer, you will fail, period. And if you stay tight with it, you will absolutely accelerate how good you can be. So we stay close to the customer, we stay close to revenue. And that one does start to say, like, well, Greg, are you saying we need to be salespeople? No, no, no. Be a salesperson if that's what you want to be. And that also has its value in driving, leadership capabilities, etc. But understanding why customers buy, why and how will they buy our value? And I'm not talking sling and use cars. It's vision casting, and it's no different than sort of CEO down to the organization. It's consultant down to our customer. Why would you buy from us? How can I make sure that we're going to make you successful? There's some overlap with staying close to the customer, but I would say this one starts to go internally. What does that mean? If we're selling to a customer, how do we do that internally? How do we do sales to delivery handoffs? How do we do kickoffs? How do we, we're always selling. How do we make sure that customers continue to find value in the products we sell? And our products are our time and our value back to them. So that's a big one to me. And I will give a shout out on that, because when I was a consultant living in Greenville, South Carolina, working at Customer Effective. It's one of the most valuable pieces of advice that Michael Elliott gave me, and I will never forget it because I think that is more than anything what's accelerated my career. So kudos to Michael on that one. And then the last one that I'll give um, is simplify the complex. And the higher up I've gotten as a leader, my ability, whether it's to a customer, to my own teams, or to my stakeholders above me, the ability to say, I can help simplify complex things, whether that's complex implementations, complex support services, complex internal processes and procedures. Being able to make those simple and the ability to create buy-in within our teams and our customers, that is extremely important. And I think if you look at the people I look at as sort of guideposts of who I want to be like and who I want to help lead a company like, that is something that you'll see as a common bond or common characteristic amongst very good leaders is their ability to say, I understand our customers, I understand how we make and sell our value, and I'm able to sort of simplify things that are really complex. You'll find that those three traits in almost every single great leader, whether you look at Steve Jobs or the CEO of a small Dynamics partner that you want to be like. I mean, you'll find those everywhere. So that's kind of my three golden rules of building good leadership teams.
Yeah. And another thing that you've talked about, I think that's awesome. And truly expert advice. And I'll be sure when I'm listening back to this episode to be taking some notes and really thinking about it. So I appreciate everything you're sharing there. And you know, one part of your job, and you've talked about this, is setting company culture, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously the company culture is not just, you know, marked by your actions and words. You know, you need to instill it in other people and everything else. But one thing I've always appreciated about you was your ability to bring this same energy to every meeting that we were in together. So, as I mentioned briefly in your intro, you used to work at Hitachi Solutions, which is a Microsoft partner that I currently work at, and that's how I first kind of got to um, heard the name Greg Gant. But every time you were in a meeting and you were speaking on something or kicking off the meeting, it was, at least in my experience, the same line. Hey gang, it's Greg Gant here. And then if there's Itachi people out there, they know exactly what I'm talking about. You know, and anyway, so I can't help but feel like the energy that you always try to bring. I'm sure in some of those meetings you were having great days and some you were not, but nonetheless, like, you brought the same energy, you were setting the same culture. I mean, how do you feel? Obviously, as the CEO, you play a huge role in this, in setting the company culture. But how do you feel that your role as an individual plays such a critical
Mm-hmm.
role in the whole organization's culture?
Yeah. First off, that's an amazing story, and thank you for that. And it's unintentional, but I really appreciate it. And I think I'll add one thing, and it's topical because we're growing like crazy. I've been interviewing a million people. It feels like a week, and part of a question I always get is, Greg, tell me about work-life balance in PS Hummingbird. And of course, I'm interviewing. I'm honest about hey, we're growing. It's a hard place to work, but I will tell you this, and it goes into the culture piece, which will take me back to your question. When you have a mission and you say, hey, I understand clarity of purpose, I understand what good looks like, I'm bought in on trying to accomplish that mission. And man, we were kind of joking about team sports before we got started here, Griffin. It's similar to that, right? You have clear definition and delineation to a trophy, and you're trying to get a trophy, and you got to build a team to get there. And whether that's a little league baseball tournament or an FCS national championship, right? It doesn't matter. If you have a mission, work-life balance is rarely a challenge, and that's where we like to start. That's how I like to start this, because you start with, hey gang, it's Greg Gant, and I'm happy to be here. Because I'm happy to be here, yeah, it could be a crappy day, could be a good day. I might have just got my butt kicked in a meeting because our financials weren't there and I'm walking into the next. but the mission never changes. The mission is there, and we know what we're doing, and we're there to solve it, and we're there to win. And typically, if you bring those elements, you've got the starting recipe to build good culture, because everyone understands clarity of purpose. Everyone understands what is the trophy and how are we going to get there. You're going to take lumps. You're going to lose, right? If every good team sort of lost a game and then fell off track and never got on track, bad teams do that, but good teams, there's only one. I'm a Miami Dolphins fan. 1972 Miami Dolphins undefeated season. There's only one GOAT. But everybody else, they've lost some games along the way, and they still understand what it is to win. So part of the way I think about my role in cascading a culture downwards is you start with a clear mission. You start with understanding everybody's position on the team and how they're going to contribute to winning. And typically when you do that, you've got the seeds to build a great culture. Now, part of that too, though, as CEO, is I've got to remind some folks every once in a while, right? Hey, here's the mission. Here's how we're going to go do this. We need to understand pace and purpose on how we're going to go achieve that vision and make sure that we do set out to win, no doubt about it. And, often I found if you've got those right foundations in place, Griff, the rest of it, for the most part, kind of takes care of itself, because people have positive intent. They want to be a part of a team. They want to go win. If they don't, and I could go on a big, long podcast about this, but if they don't, it's very important to understand that early on. And sometimes folks don't fit into, the purpose, and they maybe want other things and different things, and that's okay. Understanding that very early and sort of weeding those seeds out of your sort of team is really, really important. And it doesn't mean that you've done anything wrong or that person's done anything wrong. It just might mean they're not a fit on that team, but they'll find a fit on another team, and that's okay. Understanding those principles, then sort of identifying very, very clear communication principles about how we talk about winning and our vision and those things. Man, it just starts to work itself out like a good team typically does, right? You spend a lot of time in training camp, everybody gets aligned, everybody starts to build the right stuff. And then you start into the season, and maybe the first few games, everyone's figuring each other out. But once you've got that piece moving, you just start winning. And people show up and they know what to do and they know what good looks like. And, you align compensation. I hate to get off into that tangent on a culture discussion, but it's critical. You align compensation, and next thing you know, it starts to work. And it's my role to make sure that we're doing all those things. Maybe I'll end on just one anecdote. I've found in my career as a leader, going into teams and just telling teams, you're going to have good culture and you're going to want to be here, rarely works. You have to build all these things around that. And it goes back to the principles and the clarity of purpose and the pathway and the strategy. And you do all this stuff. And you hire the right people that align to those things, and they have shared interests to go get it done, whether it's via compensation or, accolades, whatever it might be, career path alignment. Usually you can build a pretty cool machine to go get that stuff done. So hopefully that helps. This is a fascinating topic of mine, or an interesting topic of mine. I could go way down the path, but hopefully that gives you how I
Yeah.
think about it.
I think too, you're talking about winning, and we're talking sports, and you're obviously a big football fan. I enjoy the sport of American football as well. Um, I think one of my biggest takeaways was like the best teams that I was a part of. The reason they were so good is because there was peer leadership, right?
Yeah.
Like if there could have been zero coaches at practice, and practice would have looked the exact same. It would have been just as intense. We would have done just as much conditioning, right? We would have been there just as early and stayed just as late. And I think that, it's just a phenomenal principle that also applies,
Yeah.
I'll share one story. I remember explicitly. So when I was in high school, I grew up in a suburb called Westfield, Indiana, near Indianapolis. And I had the opportunity. My team. We won a state championship, and I think that was always kind of the weird flex, even on my college buddies. They're like, "You won a state championship?" So everybody appreciates the state championship. Well, anyways, so Um, I remember one time there was basically a conflict with like the middle school football game that all the high school coaches had to go to. There was some event they were doing, pregame, whatever, and we had just started conditioning. Now let me just continue to paint this picture. We're high schoolers. We are 14 to 18-year olds. You know, no one's really that mature. No one's really that disciplined, whatever. But sure enough, coach pulled up, the two or three captains on the team and was like, "Hey, we all got to go. You guys know what you're supposed to do. Make sure it gets done, whatever." And I remember coaches left, and maybe they had someone watching us with binoculars. I don't know, but it didn't feel like it. And there were a couple guys that were like, "Oh, let's go. We ain't got no conditioning, whatever." And I remember
Mm-hmm.
um, one of the seniors, like basically just spoke on this principle of like, no, we're gonna run. We have 12 more whatevers, to do. Like, we're gonna do it, and we're gonna do it right. And I think that just goes to show, we ended up being the best team, or we,
Yeah.
we were the underdogs through the whole playoffs, and ended up winning 16-13 on a fourth down goal line stop, or third down goal line stop. Then they faked the field goal, and we stopped it. And insane, right?
Yeah.
And even
Yeah.
though that was, I don't even want to think about, it's too many years ago, but just playing through that. And I think that just in that scenario, if we wouldn't have done that conditioning, I don't know if we would have been the same team.
Yeah.
And so, huge
Yeah.
tangent there. I
No, it's
appreciate you
cool.
letting me sit on my soapbox there. But I mean, I I have a question.
Yeah.
Here's a scenario. I'm on a team. We're talking company culture and being a positive influence. I'm on a team. My team member is an energy vampire, right? They are sucking all the energy out of. They bring in bad, mindset, poor culture. They're bringing down the culture. I mean, how would you go about navigating this scenario?
Yeah. Yeah. That's common, right? Well, maybe not common, but it does happen. And it's really interesting because uh, in our world, if you're around consulting long enough, you're going to find yourself in those positions. And typically they start to have signs of poor customer sat on a project, or maybe even poor project team member sat. Like our own people might say, "Hey, can I get moved to a different project?" And it's sometimes because of the energy vampires. I like that term. Um, yeah, I actually I got a couple things I like to do here. Number one is I start with assuming positive intent, Griff. I assume that everyone on the team wants the team to succeed, no doubt about it. And sometimes that's not the case, but I want to start with assuming that. And I want to start with an assumption of empathy too. Like, hey, let's go figure out kind of what's going on. And if there is an energy vampire, let's try to figure out what the deal is there. And maybe there's something that I can do one on one and help. What I found is often there isn't. And what I found is more common and harder to fix, but when you fix it, it feels really good. Is that typically this kind of goes to your peer leadership as well. Um, what I've found is often you'll find that there's folks that are on the team, but they're not really in the team. Man, they're showing up, they're punching the time clock, but they don't feel like they're part of the greater good of a good, healthy team. And so I do a few things to start there. Number one is it actually dials all the way back to making sure that we understand the clarity of purpose and what we're doing. That that piece is usually kind of okay, and you'll figure that out. The second step is, and I usually identify who are those peer leaders going to be. Um, and I'll actually anonymize a story here that will help make this real. I went into a project one time that the customer was very unhappy, right? They felt like we were not delivering value. The team wasn't doing the right stuff. And then I went to the team and I kind of talked to everybody one on one. And you could tell everybody at the team was kind of at wit's end. They're like, I don't know what that guy or that gal over there is doing. I don't know I don't trust what that person's doing. I don't trust what this person's doing. Even amongst the team leaders, Griff, our project manager, our engagement leads, our architects, they were all looking around going, I don't know. I don't know if we can even be successful. Think about that. If we as team members are saying, I don't know if we can be successful, they're the ones looking around wondering, hey, do we really need to do 3 more sets of squat thrusts or can we just go home? Like the coach is gone, right? And so
Yeah.
we look around and we say, okay, step one is let's get the team together and say, can we be successful or not? And that's one of my go-tos. Anyone that's worked with me that's listening to this has probably been a part of an exercise I've done where I literally will go one by one around the room for my team and say, regardless of what success is for either the customer or for the team or for the company, say, do you believe we can do this? Take your first step into the team. Yes or no? Can we do this? The other thing I found is when we have an energy vampire, communication is almost always front and center with that, Griff. So what I'll try to do is say, let's create a dinner table culture. Once we say we can make this customer successful, the second question is, are you going to be accountable for their success? Yes or no? And what I found, again, if we're assuming positive intent, most people say, I do think we can do it. I am willing to do it. If you hear anything but a resounding yes on either of those questions, your first step as a leader is to get that person off the team because you'll never be successful, right? But assuming positive intent, you get them to say, yeah, I think we can do it. I think we can make this customer successful still. Step two is they say, yeah, Greg, I think I'm going to be accountable. I will do what it takes. Once I understand what I need to go do, I will do it and I will be on the hook for that. And then step three is we say, okay, then let's start making sure that our communication is centered around those things. And you could almost say, raise your hand if you've ever received some sort of email from an unhappy team member and you're reading it going, man, this is going to be a hard thing to work through. And so what I like to do is start with the basics. Let's get folks around the dinner table and let's understand that there isn't going to be one-on-one sidebars, you know, starting to question whether we should do the squat thrusts or should we go home or nope, we're going to talk about it at the table. And you got to set that expectation. And I guarantee you, if you walk into an unhealthy, toxic situation on a project, customer engagement, internal team, tiger team, or otherwise, doesn't matter. And you start with those three things. Are you here to win? Are you willing to do what it takes to win? And then let's start aligning all of our communication and all of the way we work together in a way that supports those two things. You can right ships with customers or otherwise, usually within days, not weeks, not months, not projects, but within days, things can start moving in the right direction. And just to finish my story on that anonymized customer, we went into a thing, we had a very, very toxic culture on the customer. We actually had someone on the leadership team of that customer project say, no, Greg, I don't think we can make them successful. So, okay, that's good to know now. We swapped them out with someone that said, I think we can and I'm willing to do that. We got the right people that felt like we could win. We then got around the dinner table and everybody said, okay, now, Greg, that I understand what I'm responsible for, I believe that I'm accountable to do that. And then we put the rhythms and cadences in place to say it starts and ends here at the dinner table. I don't want to hear anything bubble up from a customer or a sidebar or internal leadership escalation. It starts and ends at the dinner table once he had that buy-in. Griff, I'm not kidding. Within 1 week, I think the customer called my boss at the time and said, holy smokes, we're moving in the right direction. This is amazing and I like it. And then we ended up getting them live 6 months later. They ended up becoming a reference 8 months later. And I haven't been with Hitachi in a while, but I'd be willing to bet that they're still active in projects, new projects um, with Hitachi.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, when I got that original call, it was not to tell me things were going wrong. It was to tell my boss and I that if we don't go fix it within the next couple of weeks, we were going to be terminated from our relationship. So that's kind of how I approach that long-winded way of kind of getting at it. But that's what I typically like to do.
Yeah. Well, one last thing there. I have no idea what a squat thrust is, but none. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Um, Anyway, so I want to be respectful of our time, but there is one last question I'm dying to ask you. I don't know if you're too familiar with growth and fixed mindsets, but
Hmm.
seriously, 10 seconds. A growth mindset is someone who understands that they can learn, that they can grow, that they can be better, that they can reach a full potential that they can't currently reach right now. And a fixed mindset is somebody who generally, sees it as everyone else's problem and, an external locus of control, and that things just happen to them, right? And this is who they are. Now,
Yep.
you have a growth mindset. And I like to at least think that I have a growth mindset as well. I mean, why is having a growth mindset so fundamental to your career? And this is
Yeah.
a huge question, so a couple minutes, but yeah.
Yeah. No, great. It's a great question, and I'll give an anonymous shout out to a great boss of mine that actually bought the growth mindset sort of textbook and gave that to me a while back. A really great read and put some structure and academia around what I've kind of always felt and what I think a lot of leaders in our space feel. So kudos, James Gurney, if you're listening to this. But um, let me start with why that's important for us, right? So in consulting, nothing is fixed, man. Everything changes all the time. I mean, if we look at the technology, the way customers want to engage with us, the way that we deliver value to our clients, the way that we operate methodologies, I mean, you name it. I mean, some of it's cyclical, kind of comes and goes and comes and goes and comes and goes. And so you at least know what you're getting into. Other stuff just changes all the time and you don't know what's going on. The only way to build sustainable culture and business in the consulting world is by valuing the growth mindset approach and understanding that things are going to change. We have to adapt. We have to look at what's new and what's changing. And this is why, going back to my three principles of stay close to revenue, stay close to our customer, those things are so critical because we have to be always wondering where our customers going and making sure we meet them where they are. If you meet, or actually a better way to say that, if you go somewhere that your customers aren't, you will die in this business. So meeting your customers where you are means you have to have a growth mindset. You have to be thinking about what's changing and where we need to be. That's not saying we need to be good salespeople. We need, like, that's part of running a business. That's a business function. We need to do that well, just like we need to be great project managers and great consultants. But the mindset across the organization of we're going to follow our customers, we're going to be where they are, we're going to adapt to the way that they want to work with us. You can't have a successful consulting business with anything other than that. So summarized my, I could go on a 50-minute diatribe on why I think that's important, but that's kind of my elevator pitch is be where the customer is and be ready to adapt, and the growth mindset is critical there, to say the least.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I want to be respectful of our time. I don't think we really have time for our after hours happy hour segment of the video, which is okay. We just gave, 45 minutes of nothing but game. And so Greg, I guess I just wanted to say I appreciate you making yourself available and fit me in. I'm ecstatic we were finally able to connect, and thank you for being
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Really enjoyed the conversation, and would love to do it again in a year or so from now when we'll have a ton of new things to talk about, especially as you continue to grow and flourish in your career, Griff. And I wish you the best, and thanks for having me, man, and really enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate you saying that. If is there say somebody was impacted by this conversation and wanted to get in contact with you, what would be the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, hit me direct, Greg at pshummingbird.com, and would love to catch up with anyone listening.
Okay, awesome. Sounds good. Again, thank you for being here. Thank you to you for sticking to the end of the video. My name is Griffin Lickfeld, the host of Citizen Developer. I'm excited to connect with you in the next one.